Chad, welcome to the Way of Champions podcast. It's an honor to have you on, my friend.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, I'm excited. Dove into your new book here and all sorts of stuff, but I can't imagine there's that many former Navy SEALs who then become a professional golfer. Do you know of others besides you?
I mean, I know of one guy who played, he's probably 10, 15 years older than me, and he
Uh-huh.
played some, I don't know, it might have been like web.com or like Nike Tour stuff.
Hmm.
Like I think before he went in the teams and then did that, but I mean, there wasn't much money back in golf
Yeah,
in the days. But I mean, he's a pretty solid golfer. I'd say there's uh at least like five pretty good like golfers that are SEALs that I know of that
yeah,
probably could have done it.
yeah.
Maybe like 5 to 10.
Yeah. I mean, it's not the sport that you think of the crossover with someone who's a SEAL
Oh, you
necessarily,
didn't?
but
No,
maybe
you
it
didn't
is.
think that. No, you wouldn't think somebody. I mean, like, oh yeah, you played golf, and oh, now you're going to be a SEAL. Like most of, like the SEALs, they heavily recruit into like wrestling programs, right?
Right,
Especially
right.
wrestling programs in the Midwest.
Yeah.
So you get a kid who like grew up doing farm chores and he's a wrestler,
Yeah.
like he's probably pretty tough.
It's probably pretty tough and disciplined and all those things. Well, talk about like your background there because that was your thing. You talk about wanting to be a golfer and then all of a sudden this shift into going into the service and everything. So maybe just kind of talk about your background and we'll explore the Navy SEAL part of your life before the golf part, and then we'll get into the book.
Okay, sounds good. Well, I mean, I think kind of as a kid, like whatever thing I was doing, and maybe not even as a kid, maybe as an adult too, but the thing that I was doing, I kind of just went all in.
Mhm.
So, like when I played Little League Baseball, I would, imagine I was like Nolan Ryan, like pitching to win the World Series. Then I was a gymnast for a while, uh, did that, and then went to West Texas and visited my great grandpa, and he died a few years back, but he lived to be like almost 100.
Mhm.
So pretty good genes there. But anyway, he was a farmer in West Texas, and like kids do, you're like, digging around, getting into stuff, digging in the barns, and I found this like old set of golf clubs. In fact,
Mhm.
I've still got the clubs, like
Nice.
they're Persimmon Head, Ben Hogan woods, and the irons are like rusty with the old like leather grips with the like flat part on the side. And I was like, "Oh, Papa, what are these?" He's like, "Oh, those are my golf clubs." So he's like, "Oh, there's some balls over there. Like, oh, take them and just go hit them in the field. Like, do whatever you want." So like for a few days, I just hit them, and then when we got ready to leave, he came up and like put them in the car and goes, "Hey, just take these home with you."
Mm.
So there was a field next to my house where I grew up, and I would just kind of hit balls there before I
Yeah.
realized there was a golf course like a mile away. I actually
Yeah.
drove by it. Like I live like 20 miles from there now,
Mhm.
but I drove by it with my youngest. I was like, yeah, I used to hit golf balls right here in this field. And I'm looking at it and looking at the distance from that to like the Ranch Road 12, like the road that goes through there. And I'm like, I can't believe my parents let me hit golf balls right here. Like, killed someone.
Nice.
So
Dude,
I figured out,
yeah, go ahead.
yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say you still hit balls with those clubs because it's just making me think of my dad's old golf clubs, which I have, and he's still alive. He's 88, and I take them out and swing once in a while. And if you don't hit that square, man, it rattles your hands for sure. When we think about the equipment we can use today.
Well, I mean, when I was playing golf full time, like when I was working with Kevin, I would actually sometimes I'd take my wooden driver and just go play with that.
Yeah.
But now I play. I'm playing tomorrow and I'm playing Saturday, but
Hmm.
normally I play like once every month or two. So I'm
Hmm.
not taking a wooden driver out when I go to play.
Yeah,
I need some
enjoy it.
forgiveness.
As much help as possible. Awesome. So I interrupted. So go ahead. So yeah, you found golf and you were really into golf, and then
Yeah.
what was the
So
transition?
yeah, kind of, just got into that, worked at golf courses so I could practice and play. And, I homeschooled, grew up homeschooling. And, like when I was in high school, I could finish all my work in, like a couple hours.
Yeah.
And so I'd like finish my work and I'd go practice. So,
Mhm.
in the summers, it was like sun up to sundown. We're like practicing, we'd play 36 holes. Like we had a group of us and we'd just go out there and like, no, our
Mhm.
parents weren't saying, oh, you need to go practice. Like we just did it because we love doing it.
Yeah, exactly.
So kind of my plan was like, okay, I'm going to go, try to walk on and, play it. It was Southwest Texas then,
Mhm.
now it's Texas State or
Mhm.
UT or really anywhere was kind of my plan. Uh, and then 9/11 happened. Remember, I
Mhm.
was working at the golf course at Onion Creek Country Club, pulling the carts out, and somebody came in and go, "Hey, you got to come in and look at this." And
Mhm.
walked in there. Kind of saw on live TV as the second plane flew in. So I thought, man, like golf, just for whatever reason, it like didn't seem important to me. Like I felt like I need to serve my country,
Mhm.
and I don't know. It wasn't very long after, like within a week, might have been like
Mhm.
3 days later, I went to the Navy recruiting office
Mhm.
and said, I don't really know much about it. I heard like SEALs are where it's at. I
Mhm.
think I want to do that. And the recruiter's like, oh yeah, I've worked with SEALs, and he was like 30 pounds overweight. So I'm like, okay, well, they may
Mhm.
not be that good. So I went next door to the Marine Corps office,
Mhm.
and these guys were like pretty serious looking. I'm like, y'all got anything like SEALs? They're like, oh yeah, we got Force Recon. It's better. I'm
Mhm.
like, okay,
Mhm.
sign me up. So
Mhm.
went to MEPS, enlisted in the Marine Corps, or like, signed up to enlist, and then got denied
Mhm.
for a, metal plate in my arm. I'd broken my arm when I was, 13, falling off a fence,
Mhm.
and they denied me, not just from
Mm.
the Marine Corps, but from every branch.
Yeah.
So I like had this thing like, okay, this is what I need to do. And they're like, no, you can't do it.
Yeah.
So went to community college for a little bit, couldn't get them. I didn't, I just wasn't motivated. Like I
Mhm.
couldn't make it to an 8 a.m. math class, and math was like my best subject, but like I dropped the class, dropped
Mhm.
a couple other classes. 6 months later, I like dropped out of college
Mhm.
and just worked random jobs.
Mhm.
Um, and then I was actually running a power washing crew for a buddy of mine's dad, and it was kind of like one of those dirty jobs, right? It's like,
Mike Rowe.
yeah,
Yeah.
like micro dirty jobs. He could have an
Mhm.
episode on this, but we'd essentially like power wash all the commercial kitchens. Like we did all the
Oh,
McDonald's between
yeah.
like Austin and San Antonio. So you go
Mhm.
in there and it's like, got all the grease up in the grease traps up there.
Yeah.
And you go up there and degrease it and then hose it off like Chinese
Ugh.
food restaurants.
Ugh.
Like the worst grease up in there. Like it's so hard to get off. Like,
Yeah. No one's
man,
gonna eat fast food after this podcast.
I have not eaten McDonald's
Since then.
in over 20 years.
Yeah, there we go.
So, I mean, I did that. Like I was making good money. I mean, I was, 18, 19 years old, making over 20 bucks an hour. And that was 20 years ago. So
Mhm.
like making good money. I don't know
Mhm.
where any of it went. Uh, that's a different story.
Mhm.
But, when you're a kid, you buy a lot of dumb stuff.
Mhm.
But we'd worked late one night. And then the next morning, we got up early to drive to South Texas for a power washing job at one of the Air Force bases. And I fell asleep at the wheel and hit an 18-wheeler head on.
Mm.
And like all I remember was like being tired. I asked my buddy who was like working with me, "Hey, do you want to drive?" And he's like, sitting in the passenger seat. He said, "No, I'm tired," and went back to
Mhm.
sleep. So I just remember like rolling down my window, like slapping myself in the face,
Yeah.
turning up the radio, and the next thing I knew, I woke up in a life flight helicopter.
Mm.
So, fortunately, like I walked out of the hospital the next day with like a bunch of road rash and a headache. Like I didn't even have my seatbelt on.
Mm.
And I was like, I need to do something with my life.
Mhm.
So, the Navy or the Marines had disqualified me and they had to wait 2 years, like if I wanted to
Mhm.
apply for a waiver. So it was like
Mhm.
my 2 years was basically up.
Mhm.
So I like did my research. I was like, walked into the Navy recruiting office like a month later, was like, hey, I want to do the SEAL challenge. I need to
Mhm.
get a waiver for my arm. Here's all the
Mhm.
paperwork. I can leave tomorrow.
Mhm.
They were like, okay, sounds good. Like, got my waiver process. They're like, well, you can't leave tomorrow. You can leave in July. It's like,
Mhm.
okay, good enough.
Mhm.
So that's kind of how I went from golf to uh, the SEALs.
I love your story because you said you write in your book, that you got to Bud's training and you weighed 135 pounds and quote, tell me if I'm wrong, but the longest you'd ever run was a mile and a half and whatever. And you're looking around at these Olympic caliber athletes going, wait, what am I doing here?
Yeah, I mean the mile. People are like, well, you only ran a mile and a half. I was like, well, it said, hey, there's a screen test, and you've got to be able to do like 42 push-ups in 2 minutes, 50 sit-ups, run a mile and a half and under. I don't remember what the time was, but I like beat
10
that on the
minutes or
try.
something. Yeah.
I was like,
Yeah.
oh, that's easy.
Yeah.
And then swim 500 yards and do some pull-ups and stuff.
Yeah.
So, okay, I can beat the screen test. Like, I'm good.
Yeah. 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 That's good. Yeah. But as you said, a lot of them washed out and you didn't. So like what did you learn from SEAL training that I mean that you're still teaching your own kids and everyone today?
Yeah. So, I mean, one of the things, so, when I went to A school, so, when you go in the Navy, like now, SEALs have their own rate. And
Hmm.
like your rate is just like your job in the
Hmm.
Navy, right? Because you could be in the Navy and you could do a lot of different things.
Hmm.
Uh, but before, SEALs didn't have their own rate. So you had to pick, like they called it a SEAL source rate. So that is basically like, okay, if you pick this job, you go to boot camp, then you go to this A school, which is just like a training school for that job, and then
Hmm.
you go to BUDS.
Hmm.
If you don't make it through BUDS, then you go back to the regular Navy and do this job.
Yeah.
So I went to A school, and there was a group of guys getting ready to go to BUDS, and
Yeah.
they'd get up at like 4 in the morning and go run like obscene distances
Hmm.
and lay in the water in Virginia Beach in, September through December. It was
Hmm.
freezing,
Hmm.
and surf tortured themselves. And I got
Hmm.
up like the first day and went with them, like, all right, we're getting in the water. I was like, you guys are crazy. Like, this
Hmm.
doesn't even count. So I went back to bed,
Hmm.
and they were all like, well, we'll see if you make it.
Hmm.
Like every single one of those guys, except maybe one of them,
Hmm.
they all quit. Right.
Hmm.
So it was like they had in their mind, like, and I think part of to answer your question of like, why did some people make it and some people not, like this, like my opinion is, like my goal wasn't like to make it through BUDS. Like my goal was to like be a SEAL and like serve my country.
Hmm.
Right. So BUDS was just like an obstacle in the way. And I
Hmm.
knew it was going to suck. I just had to get through it.
Hmm.
There was a lot of guys who were like, oh yeah, like it was kind of like that was their goal of
Right.
like, or that,
Right. Or to set some record or something like that. And yeah,
yeah.
it was
So it
about
was like,
them. Yeah.
yeah, like from day one, I was like, this is terrible. Like, this is miserable. I just have to like kind of get through it.
Hmm.
And some guys would go, oh, this is awesome. We're finally doing it. I'm like, dude, this sucks. Like,
Hmm. Hmm.
I'll be here tomorrow though.
Hmm.
It's like
Yeah.
you could see it in their eyes when they just like realized that it sucked.
Yeah.
And they went, oh, wow. And it was like 10 minutes later, they'd go quit.
Yeah.
But that's one part of it. The other part is, a lot of the guys who were just like, I mean, we're talking literally Olympic caliber athletes that were
Hmm.
there. And by the end of it, I was like winning 4 mile timed runs. Hey,
Yeah.
like I got faster.
Yeah.
But a lot of the guys who were like superstar, like track stars,
Yeah.
ended up quitting, and I think kind of my opinion on this is a lot of them had never really like learned how to fail or have
Yeah.
somebody like in their face when they're failing.
Yeah.
So like there's going to be something in BUDS that gets you. Like you can't really be a rock star at everything.
Hmm.
So it's like whenever you hit that failure, like how are you going to respond? Because
Hmm.
essentially like BUDS is, especially first phase is like a selection process of like we want to find the guy who's not going to quit when the chips are down. Like are they going to keep going?
Hmm.
Uh,
Hmm.
so I mean I think that was that one part of it. A lot of guys just kind of like psych themselves out.
Yeah.
I had one guy in my class. It was and it was like his third or fourth time at BUDS,
Mm.
and he would get to like Tuesday of Hell Week. And
Hmm.
typically Hell Week is like we had a fifth week Hell Week. So
Hmm.
the fifth week of first phase was our
Hmm.
Hell Week. And this guy had made it to like Monday or Tuesday of Hell Week like 3 times already.
Hmm.
So it's like the dude's already done like,
Like a
how many
one and a half buds.
he's already done like one and a half buds of like the worst part,
Yeah.
like over and over again. He's just, and I ended up running to, and he was like an E6
Yeah.
whenever I went in. So like when we were in buds together, and I was like an E2, right?
Uh-huh.
I was coming the Navy.
Yeah.
When I made E7, when I was a chief, I ran into him, and he was still an E6. I'm like, dude, what are you doing? He's like, oh, well, I'm trying not to get promoted so I can go back to buds again. I'm like,
Oh my
dude,
God, really?
like you can do something else. Like
Yeah.
this isn't for everyone. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
but yeah, I don't
Well,
know.
I mean, I've heard now a lot, right? Obviously buds, there's this incredible physical thing, but so much of it is mental, and that the Navy has put more attention onto that, right? Because, and you would maybe know more than me, but having 90% of people or whatever the number is wash out versus, hey, how can we support them on this mental part, the thing that you had this strength and everything you're talking about. Okay, you're going to fail. There's going to be horrible moments. Expect those, train for those, whatever. That they're doing more now. I mean, they have directors of mental performance and stuff to get people who are physically capable of getting through over the mental hurdles. What are your thoughts on that? Because it
Yeah, I
really
mean,
relates to what you write about and stuff as well.
yeah, I mean, it's really, I mean, it's like the $1 million question. And like, I've got some ads for my book running, and somebody like commented on the other day, like, well, if your book works, why is the dropout rate at Buds still high? I'm like,
Yeah.
well, hey, my book has nothing to do with like making it through Buds. It's
Yeah.
like, I can take like what I learned and use it for the
Yeah.
stuff I'm trying to do. Uh, but, most people are like, it comes down to like Hell Week, right?
Hmm.
But anyway, the Navy spent, all this money. They've got this like psychological test they do to try to identify like who has the mindset to do it. And
Yeah.
I think, the way it was best explained to me is they haven't figured out like the guy who's going to make it, but they've like identified the person who won't make it,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
you could just have a conversation with somebody for 5 minutes and probably come to the same conclusion.
Yeah.
Uh,
Interesting.
but, but for me, for Hell Week, like somebody told me when I got to Buds, like, hey, nobody quits after Wednesday of Hell Week.
Yeah.
I have no idea if that's like an actual statistic or not, but I
Uh-huh.
just chose to believe that in my mind.
Yeah. Like if I can
Right
get through
there,
Wednesday, I'm there.
I just cut the week in half in
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
mind, right? So it's like, okay, I just got to make it to Wednesday. But you
Yeah.
start like Sunday night and you have
Hmm.
breakout and it's all chaotic and it goes until Friday afternoon sometime.
Hmm.
But like Wednesday's still pretty far away. So you're
Yeah.
like, okay, I can just make it to the next meal.
Yeah.
And you eat every 4 to 6 hours,
Yeah.
something like that. But when you get going and you're running and you're doing all these things and carrying logs and paddling boats and swimming and getting surf tortured, like 4 hours might as well be like a year from now,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
right? So eventually, I mean, it didn't take long. We're talking like by, you know, Monday morning, like after midnight, I'm like, okay, the next like Wednesday's way too far away. The
Yeah.
next meal is too far away. Like I'm gonna just pick something 10 feet in front of me,
Yeah.
and like I'll run over there. Maybe like I'll just quit when I get over to that rock. I'll quit when I get to that tree. When we get over
Yeah.
that berm, maybe I'll quit there, and I just like reset and be like, oh, that wasn't so bad. Like I'll just make it to here.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's like, and the way I've applied that to like sports and business and all that, it's like we have an all overall idea of like, here's what I want to get. Like I want to build this business. I want to write this book. I want to make it to the PGA Tour, whatever this thing is. But these goals are like so massive. But we got to
Hmm.
take a step back and look at like, okay, what's the thing 10 feet in front of me that I
Yeah.
can just get to right now? And then
Yeah.
I get to that, and okay, what's the next one?
I think
Uh,
that's such a hugely important thing that it's okay to have this big, lofty, far off goal, but what are the not just the process goals, but what are the small wins along the way? Because yeah, when you're 12, becoming a pro athlete is so far off, right?
yeah,
What's your goal for when you're 12? Right? Make the
yeah,
top team. What's your goal when you're 13? Like find these steps along the way, whether it's the rock 10 feet in front of you or, you know, cutting 10 seconds off your mile time.
yeah. Because I think what happens is you take a big goal, whether it's trying to be a professional athlete or make it through Hell Week, and you can psych yourself out,
Hmm.
right? If you start thinking like I have to stay up for a week straight and I've got to run, you know, how many ever hundreds of miles and paddle these boats and do all this, you're like, well, I don't know how anyone can do that. I mean, I'd
Hmm.
say like the one takeaway I had from like Hell Week was
Yeah.
I could do 20 times what I thought I could do
Yeah. Yeah.
just by like not focusing on it and like, doing that thing. I mean, like an
Just being
example,
where
like,
your feet are, like not
uh,
not not a day or two ahead. Yeah.
like how many times have you done something and when you got done with it, you were like, man, I am glad I didn't know everything I was going to have to do to get this done.
That, or also you get it done, you go, you know what, that wasn't as bad as I made it out to be as well. Like
Yeah.
sometimes it's both of those things, right? That wow, I thought that conversation, I thought that moment, I thought that training was going to be way worse than it was, or that was way worse, and thank God I didn't know what I was getting into.
Yeah, and that's kind of, guys had different strategies. So like after Hell Week, like in second, Hell Week is in first phase. In second phase, like the kind of milestone, the thing you got to get through is pool comp, right? Where
Hmm.
you put on all the dive gear and you've got to do all these, proficiency tests. Like
Mhm.
you'll go down and it's like the surf hit where instructors come down and just, attack you underwater and like,
Mhm.
like try to beat the crap out of you while you're underwater. Because
Yeah.
what's the purpose of that? Well, whenever you go in the ocean and a wave hits you, like I don't know if you
Mhm.
ever like surfed before,
Yeah,
and a
not well, so they've hit me very
yeah,
hard.
so you got to be able to like deal with that,
Mhm.
right? And you want to learn in a safe environment where there's, a safety staff and medical support and all that. Like
Mhm.
you want to know who can handle that before you put them into, an actual real world situation. So
Mhm.
you got this whole pool comp hurdle, and my strategy was like, I'll go first,
Yeah.
right? Like if I could, like maybe I couldn't always, but it was like get in the front of the line and just like get it over with,
Yeah.
right? And because a lot of times you could sit there and you don't get to watch, but you can hear what's going on. Like
Yeah,
they
and
may
psych
turn your
yourself
back.
out.
You could psych yourself out from that. So it's like, okay, let me just go first and get it over with. And
Yeah.
now the rest of this time where we're here, like it's already like I'm already done with that. And I kind of like mentally relax, right? Instead
Mhm.
of like being all stressed out this whole time. And then I go do it and I'm like, oh, and then I'm jumping to the next one.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
like
Yeah.
nobody, I mean, nobody like, taught me that. I don't think I just
Yeah.
kind of did it. I was like, okay, I just want to get it over with.
That's awesome. So you go, you do the SEALs. I think you said 12 years you were in on the
Yeah.
teams, and then you decide now I'm gonna follow my golf dream.
Yeah. So, it kind of felt like I'd done the things I signed up to do.
Yeah.
It hit Iraq, Afghanistan, a lot of different places in the world. And like my boys were starting to get older. Had, have three boys. And, I just, like I was at team four and then I was an instructor for 3 years. So
Hmm.
I went from being gone, like 20, 18 to 22 months a year to
Yeah.
I was home all the time.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like we traveled 4 or 5 weeks a year because it
Yeah.
was like local training that we taught.
Yeah.
Then, so they got used to me being home and I was like, the dad stuff and,
Yeah.
we're sports and all this stuff. And then I went back to a team and then I'm gone,
Yeah.
18 to 22 months a year. And I
Yeah.
could see kind of the impact it had. I'm like, okay, do we want to keep doing this? By the time
Yeah.
like right, I would have hit 20 years in
Hmm.
July
Hmm.
but I would have missed the last, 8 years being
Your
around.
kids growing up. Yeah, yeah.
So I was like, okay, well, I want to get out so I can actually, be around, do the dad stuff. And I still kind of had that thought of like, man, could I do this golf thing?
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, so somehow I convinced my wife that that was a great idea. So uh, we sold our house about, I don't know, 8 months, year before I got out. She moved back to Texas with the boys,
Yeah.
uh, like stayed with her parents. I slept at a friend's house. But my
Yeah.
last, few months in the Navy, we saved kind of all our money. Then, downsized, bought a really small house in Texas, and
Hmm.
then kind of jumped in and gave golf everything I had.
Yeah, and what was cool when I was reading your book, you talk about your golf coach, Kevin Kirk, who's a great friend of Jerry and I and has been on this podcast and everything like that. And what was cool was you actually laid out like, okay, you want to do this, here's the program, right? And I thought it was like super cool. Kevin, because him and I have talked about this, like, all right, what are the four most important things, right? That you hit it close from 150 and in, and make most of your putts from inside 10 feet or whatever it was. And there was four things, and
Yeah.
then just came up with a program of how we're going to do it. But I think the other interesting piece was when you went to Kevin, you said you're practicing 15 hours a day, and he's like, mm-mm. And there is this sort of mythology of it's the grind never ends, you never take a moment off, someone else is working, but that's not actually the most healthy way or path to high performance.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, what's that, cliche statement of, practice doesn't make perfect, practice makes permanent.
Yeah.
And so, sitting there grinding for 15 hours and being stressed out,
Yeah.
uh, doesn't help you get better. But whenever you can actually focus on like, here's the like most important things that I need to do. And then
Hmm.
like when Kevin gave me my, practice plan, like I'm good with systems.
Hmm.
But it was like each ball had a purpose. He's like,
Hmm.
hole is going to be this. This one's going to be that. After that, you have to move on and do this. You get this much time for this.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's like I started improving immediately
Yeah.
because no longer was I like, training to have the perfect golf swing. I was
Mhm.
training to like play golf and compete.
Mhm. Mhm.
Right. So, and I talk a little bit about that, kind of the training and competition mindset,
Mhm.
which, um, I kind of figured it out kind of at the end. Right. And part of that was like understanding like golf statistics. Right.
Mhm.
And going with like the thing you can do. Right. Because if you get
Mhm.
up there, like, say you're a kid that's, pitching,
Mhm.
right. If you can throw this one pitch like 90% of the time,
Mhm.
and I go, okay, well, you throw that pitch, like, how confident are you that you can do that? You're
Mhm.
super confident because you've already proven you can do it.
Mhm.
But if you haven't put in the work where you can know that you can do that 90% of the time, you're like, oh, I'm going to try my curve that I can throw 8% of the time. Like your confidence is like, oh, I don't
Mhm.
really know if I can do it.
Mhm.
So like
Mhm.
understanding the statistics, because I'd hit it in the woods before and then try to hit it like under a tree, over a tree, through a hole,
Yeah.
right? And well, if I make it, I'm making birdie, but if I don't, I'm making triple.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I realized like, well, if I just chip it out to 100 yards, like if I
Yeah.
if I make worse than a 5, then my wedge game is terrible. I need to improve that.
Right,
So
right.
that was like part of it. The other part, the last time I went to like the Canadian tour
Mhm.
qualifying school and showed up there and I was hitting like this, 10-yard draw, and I
Yeah.
wanted like a 5-yard cut.
Yeah.
So I'm just like, okay, this is annoying me. So the whole first day, I'm like trying to fix my swing on the golf course,
Yeah.
and I shoot 5 over. The next day, then I go to the range and, because Kevin's like, oh, you can practice for this long after da da da. So I,
Yeah.
practice for 30 minutes. I'm like, okay, I got it. Hitting my little cut. Next day, I show up at the range to warm up, and I'm hitting this little freaking dumpy draw thing again.
Mhm.
And I got on the first tee and I said, "Ah, screw it. I'm going to just dance with the girl I brought."
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
And played great. I went like 30 holes without a bogey. I
Yeah.
wouldn't hit it like I wanted to, but
Yeah.
like I switched to that competition mindset.
Yeah.
I really didn't even realize like that's what it is,
Yeah.
until a couple years later. Like I wasn't even playing golf anymore, and my boys and I like we all trained jujitsu, and it was actually like I had done it, but then somebody like it was actually on a podcast. So we trained under John Danaher for a
Mhm.
while,
Mhm.
but he actually on a podcast he talks about his training and competition mindset kind of
Mhm.
thing. He talks about where you get a lot of guys who go in the gym and they're trying to win in training,
Mhm.
right? So they can beat the guys in their gym and they just do the things they know they're good at and they don't like push themselves to really learn and grow. So they
Mhm.
actually cripple their growth. And then when they get to competition, like they lose. So they're like staying in this, like, I've got to win mentality in training.
Mhm. Mhm.
Whereas really, it's like if you take it for training for what it is, when you're in that stage, you're like, how can I push the envelope? How can I, expand my skill sets? Like I
Mhm.
might mess it up and fail and look like an idiot in training.
Mhm.
It's that helps you like really build your skills. So for
Yeah.
me, I was kind of stuck in the training mindset a
Mhm.
little bit too long, and I had the
Yeah.
skills there. And then when I finally was like, okay, I'm going to just do what I know how to do and make it happen,
Yeah.
that's when I started playing better.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because then I mean I like this idea, right? Like, play the game that you have on the day, not the one. And when I've talked to Kevin, about golf and just obviously watching golf and being a fan, it's like you said, they rarely hit two bad shots in a row, right? You're always like you watch them play and you're like, yep, from there I'd have made triple, and they still made par or whatever because yeah, they
Yeah.
pitched out and hit a great wedge and sunk the putt. Right. And so I think that's such an important part of it. And then again, just the recognition that I'm not going to have my A game every day. So, play the hand I've been dealt.
Yeah. I think it's like understanding like you're rarely going to have your A game,
Yeah.
right? I think like VJ Singh, which I mean, he's probably hit more balls than most
Anybody.
people
Yeah.
on.
He had like the famous trenches on the range and
Yeah,
everything. Yeah.
like I mean, he said, "Oh, how many good shots do you hit around?" And it was like, I don't know, maybe even if he shot like 62 that day, he's like, "Oh, I hit 2 good ones."
Yeah.
Like, dang, right? It's like how good your misses are.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's crazy. So, yeah, I mean, so you do this, you work with Kevin, you do the golf thing, but then after a couple of years, you're like, that's not going to work, right? Like it's just not working financially. You got a family, kids.
Yeah, I mean, I did it for uh about 3 years.
Yeah,
It was, the third time I ran out of money.
yeah,
It was like, okay, like we got to do something else. Like we were
Mhm.
so broke, like we had to go to a food bank. And I
Mhm.
was like, okay, like I need to do something else.
Mhm. Mhm.
Uh, so yeah, I mean, that was definitely like a hard pill to swallow. And you're like, okay, am I like giving up on my dream and doing all that? Well, like we can always like find our next like thing we're trying to accomplish.
Mhm.
It took me a little while to like kind of figure that out. But kind of at that point, it was like, okay, like I've done the SEAL thing, I've done the professional golf thing, and now like, how does this apply to the real world?
Mhm.
Right. So it's first like, okay, I need to get a job and make money.
Mhm.
How do you actually get a job? Like
Mhm.
I've been, in the military my entire life. So, it's like I speak a different language. Like,
Yeah.
how do I articulate the things that I know and how does that actually apply to a business? Like, that's a skill I didn't have.
Mhm.
I mean, I filled out probably 100 job applications, went on job interviews, like, couldn't get a job.
Yeah.
So, I applied to my neighbor was a police officer. So I applied to like the police academy. And then a friend of mine told me about this business school.
Mhm.
It was like taught by entrepreneurs. So I applied there too. I'm like, well,
Mhm.
whichever one like takes me first,
Mhm.
I'll go. And the police academy came back and they're like, oh, we'd love to have you. And this is like in August, September
Mhm.
of 2018.
Mhm.
And they're like, but we don't start our next academy until January.
Mhm.
I can't wait, 3, 4 months.
Mhm.
And the business school is like, or if I got that, like my GI Bill would kick in and it,
Mhm.
like a housing allowance. And like
Mhm.
the time that was like a ton of money because our expenses were pretty small. And they came back and were like, hey, we'd love to have you. But we just started the current MBA class. So you could wait until next year.
Mhm.
Like we started 2 weeks ago.
Mhm.
I'm like, God, like nothing can be easy. It's like when I try to join the military, they're like, no, you can't
Yeah.
do it.
Yeah.
And then so I just kind of refused to accept that answer. And I got a hold of like the head of the school
Yeah.
and said, hey, look, just like give me a chance and I'll catch up. Like I'll outwork everyone there.
Yeah.
And he's like, nobody's ever asked me that before. Like,
Mhm.
okay, you're in.
Mhm.
So he's like, okay, you're in, but you got to get the deposit to show me you're serious.
Mhm.
And it's $5,000.
Mhm.
And we have like $0. I mean, we have
Mhm.
like $200 in our bank account. And the GI Bill would like pay for it all, but I wouldn't get it like by the time you follow the paperwork and do all that. So
Yeah.
I like called my brother, called my sister, uh, called a friend of mine, and within like a couple hours, like I had the money put together,
Cobbled it together. Yeah.
right, and then like got it and paid them all back. But
Yeah.
it was definitely like, okay, if you're serious, like swallow your ego and go ask for help, which that's one
Yeah.
thing I feels like I've gotten better at it, but it's like
Yeah.
we hate asking for help, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Huh.
So that's kind of did that. Uh, did the business school deal. Uh, that school is like super awesome. It's called the Acton School of Business.
Mhm.
So like Jeff Sandifer started it
Mm.
like 20 something years ago. He's also done kind of Acton Academy. And then I'm actually working with him on another project. But that
Mhm.
school made like 3 promises to everyone who's kind of disciplined enough to go through it. And it's like 100-hour plus work weeks going through that
Mhm.
thing. But it's their
Mhm.
promises were to learn how to make money,
Mhm.
and to learn to live a life of meaning.
Mhm. Mhm.
Kind of the whole thing at the end, like you go through and like, okay, here's all the stuff you've learned. How does this apply to what you want to do?
Mhm.
And you give like a talk and you invite a bunch of people there and kind of like your next great adventure thing, which is what I'm working with and I'm on now.
Mhm.
But I gave that pitch and had like 14 job offers, like
Nice.
right off the bat. So
Nice.
went from like, I can't get a job anywhere to like, okay, I've
Yeah.
got my choice of what I want to do.
That's
So
awesome, man. It's awesome. And now you're doing this amazing work. And so let's talk about the book. The book's Young Athlete's Ultimate Guide to Mental Toughness. Turn failure into fuel, loss into victory, setbacks into comebacks. 5 simple steps to build resilience, confidence, and grit in sports and life. And and you start, I mean, sort of two different things that I find interesting. One, the story you just told of like sometimes we think of mental toughness of I never give up no matter what. And yet there's an important moment in life sometimes to say, is the path around this not through it? Right. Like with professional golf. And there's no one, yeah, every situation is different, right? That's a feeling. And there's that. And then you talk in the book about your son and jujitsu and making the jump from juniors to competing against adults or just practicing with adults, going from winning all the time to losing all the time. And that getting through that phase, it's not just a physical thing, it's a mental thing, especially. So talk about that. Like talk about what was that sort of the impetus for this book, watching your kid and saying, wow, like where's your toolkit for this?
Yeah, I mean, I saw it kind of, with my kid. Unfortunately, like I'd gone through it, so I could see like, oh, this is what I did that worked.
Hmm.
But it's like really when I started coaching a bunch of my kids' sports teams, because I'm like coaching Little League right now, and I've coached, flag football and judo and jujitsu, really, kind of whatever my kids were in, I'm like involved in, trying to help coach as much as I
Hmm.
can.
Hmm.
Like now I'm the head coach of the baseball team.
Hmm.
But, you know, like when I was in the SEAL teams, like, nobody talks about like mindset, mental toughness, and all these things. It's just kind of what everyone does,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
So it's that mindset. You essentially take it for granted that that's just how everyone thinks.
Well,
And so,
you've already weeded out
yeah,
those. No, that's like people in the NBA don't talk about being 6'10" because everyone's 6'10".
exactly.
Yeah.
So when I started really like coaching kids sports, and like I just saw this huge misconception on what mental toughness is.
Hmm.
Right. So there, a kid gets up to pitch and he's 9 years old and he's terrified and nervous,
Hmm.
and he thinks there's something wrong with him because he's nervous. I'm like, no,
Right.
just like you care. That's like your
Yeah.
teammates counting on you. Your parents are watching you. All these people are watching you. Like it's fine to
Yeah.
be nervous. I'm like, just throw this one 10 feet over the catcher's head and hit the backstop and
Yeah.
then see if you survive.
Yeah.
He's like, really? I'm like, yeah, it's fine.
Yeah.
So a lot of parents will think, oh, why does my kid coach like choking? I'm like, well, he's not really choking. He just hasn't built his skills yet.
Yeah.
So it's, and, part of it is, whenever I went through it in golf, right? Like I came out of the SEAL teams and I go to like play golf, and I expect to be able to take the confidence that I had as a SEAL and
Hmm.
apply it to professional golf.
Hmm.
Well, it doesn't work that way.
No. Yeah.
Like you're starting over at zero,
Yeah.
right? You're in a new environment, and you have to learn how to be successful in that environment before you can actually be confident in it. Like the first thing Kevin told me was competence breeds confidence, and
Yeah.
confidence sets the stage for performance.
Yeah.
So it's like you have to build your competency level, which just means like I've mastered the basics and I can do those three things for this sport.
Hmm.
And then
Hmm.
you can actually be confident there. And there was
Yeah.
this thing whenever I like had to get a job, like I was not competent in that skill set. So I had no confidence there. Once I got the
Hmm.
competency, then I could get the job.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So
I read this really interesting scientific study in a recent book. Um, I think the book was Eric Potterall, who was the head of mental performance for the SEALs, and he was talking about like taking three different golfers in a putting contest, and it's very public. And there's a PGA Tour pro and a club pro and a full on amateur. And the one who struggled most under pressure was the club pro because the tour pro had the competence that no matter what the pressure was, I'll make the 10-foot putt. And the amateur just didn't really care. He was just happy to be there. But it was
yeah.
the club pro who was supposed to be this that was in his head, and it's the ego that struggled the most in that environment. And I think that's such an interesting thing, right? And so, yeah, you have all these skills from one skill set, but not the competence in the next skill set for them to hold up under pressure.
Yeah, and that's kind of why it's titled, for sports and life, right? For
Hmm.
sports, it's often easier, right? Because we know what the end goal is, right? So
Hmm.
we can break it down and use the system to like get better there.
Hmm.
But for life, it's like first we have to figure out like, well, who are we and like what do we actually want? And then you
Hmm.
can build the system in. But for
Hmm.
sports, it's pretty easy. Like, oh, I want to be good at baseball. Well, it's already kind of known what you need to get good at. Like you want to get good at golf, like you need to master these things.
Hmm.
So it's not really gray. It's pretty black and white.
Right, right.
But yeah, just kind of working through that with my kid, and seeing the growth there of like, okay, and I see this with other kids, even like parents, emailing me. They're like, oh, my kid was, a superstar last year, and now he moved up to this next age division, and he's having all these problems,
Hmm.
right? Well, 100% he's going to have problems. He's in a whole new environment now.
Hmm.
Like you're playing the same sport, but you went from being at the top of your age bracket to the bottom of your age bracket.
Yeah.
Right now, that levels out once like everybody goes through puberty.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like you've got a 13-year-old who's 80 pounds and you got a 13-year-old who's 6'2" and 200
Hmm.
pounds.
Hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's not really a level playing field.
Hmm.
So I think understanding that anytime you switch environments, you've
Yeah.
kind of got to like reassess like where you're at and what does it take to be successful at this level.
Yeah. Now, like with so your son goes and he's now competing against adults and he's losing all the time. How do you manage that? Like it sounds like you spend just a lot of time on, the parent's role in that is to give the child perspective. Like you are in a different environment. You are supposed to lose now. That's why you're in this environment. And how do you balance that with discouragement to just well, then I just quit, right? Because it's a hard thing, and I think every kid's different as well. Some kids innately are going to be more gritty, are gonna fight through that, or and some are going to, there's like a little Goldilocks to it, as not too hot, not too just right, and I think just you could have three kids, and just right could be different for each of those kids.
It's definitely different for each kid.
Hmm.
I mean, I think part of it is like, how can you ask good questions?
Hmm.
So for, my oldest, when he was in that spot and he's like, oh, I'm just terrible now. Like, I don't even want to train anymore. All those things that, all here are, even as adults, like we all say them. If we don't say them out loud, like we say them to ourselves, right?
Hmm.
Like,
Hmm.
oh, is this really going to work? But I told him like, okay, well, what would it like? Why is it not working? What would it take to work? He's like, well, everyone's stronger than me. I'm
Hmm.
like, okay, so do we need to work out?
Hmm.
Well, yeah, I guess that would help me get stronger. He's like, well, I was like, he's like, well, I can't submit anybody. I'm like, and he's like, I can't get out of any pins. I'm like, well, do we need to work on your technique on how you escape from stuff better?
Hmm.
Like, yeah, maybe that would help. So we started
Hmm.
like a workout plan. So now it's like we've set out these like little rocks where he can
Hmm.
start getting some wins outside of that. Where you're like, oh, dude, your bench went up 20 pounds. It's like, oh,
Hmm.
yeah. So now he's
Hmm.
like getting these little wins outside of it.
Yeah.
And then it's like, hey, instead of, and you see this with anyone who starts like jujitsu, like you step on the mats and like you're going to lose
Yeah.
a long time, but
Yeah.
you can reframe in your mind what winning and losing is. So
Yeah.
if you
Yeah.
roll
Yeah.
with somebody and they're like, in 5 minutes, this person submitted me 20 times,
Right.
next time only get submitted 19 times.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, like they only got me 19 times. Or
Yeah.
like, oh, I got out of this position. Okay, that's a win for me
That's a
today. Like
win. Yeah.
you have to
Exactly.
reframe what a win is because it's
Yeah.
unrealistic to expect that you're going to go in on your first day and beat somebody who's been training for 20 years.
Yeah.
Like
And
that.
this is a challenge on, let's call them subjective sports rather than objective sports, right? Your bench press went up 20 pounds, easy to measure. My mile time went down 10 seconds. My 200 time went down 2 seconds, easy to measure. Swimming, right? But lacrosse, right? Even a martial arts, soccer, or whatever, it's really hard to measure progress sometimes when you feel like you're not making progress because at the end of the day, the scoreboard still says you lost.
Yeah. I mean, especially with individual sports, I mean, yeah, there's like a win lose, but whenever you're training in it and you're going against people of different skill levels,
Yeah.
it's like, hey, if you're rolling against someone better than you, that's
Hmm.
your chance to work on your defense.
Yeah.
You're going against
Yeah.
somebody you're better than, that's the time to really hone your offense and try new things.
Hmm. Hmm.
So I mean, if you were playing basketball and somebody's like, way better than you, like, okay, can I just not let them get past me on a fast break? Can I like stay on their belly button and like not get crossed up,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah. Yeah.
win, right? Like not like, okay, I'm going to beat them.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think we all want to win, but like
Yeah. But
attainable goals.
yeah, attainable goals. So this what we just talked about is sort of, you talk about these components of mental toughness and sort of this self-assessment, self-awareness is really that's stage one right there, right? Like know yourself, and have that honest conversation with the person in the mirror of, well, what can I get better objectively at that's going to make me better?
Yeah. And that would, I mean, and that's why I like framed it as a question to my kid of
Hmm.
like, hey, well, everyone's stronger than me. I'm like, oh, do we need to work out?
Yeah.
Versus, hey, you're weak and you can't escape and you got to do this. Now it's like you've put them in like a defensive mode where they
Hmm.
don't want to work on it versus, hey, well, we could do this. You think that would
Yeah.
help?
Yeah.
Right. And now it's like if they take that ownership of it on themselves,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
they're going to be more likely to actually like put in the effort.
Yeah.
Um,
Exactly. Exactly. Now it's my son knocking on my door at 6:30 in the morning going, "Dad, let's go to the gym."
yeah.
Where it used to be me waking him up, but also saying, "Hey, you wanted to do this," right? But it
Yeah.
didn't take very long for him to, and it was sort of the same thing, right? He was playing soccer and got absolutely crushed by someone who was bigger, stronger, and he goes, "I don't want that to happen again." All
Yeah.
right, well, what do you want to do about it? I want to join a gym. All right, let's go.
And that, I don't think I put it in the book, but there's another story of, my older two, we got back into like training jujitsu. And this is like, I think
Hmm.
before he moved up to the adult class.
Hmm.
And, they're just destroying everyone else in the kids class. And we're getting ready to go to a tournament. And I said, hey, do y'all want to, it's like a couple months out. I'm like, hey, do y'all want to like do some extra training? I need to show y'all some setups, some stuff like that. Nah, we're good. Like, we're going to crush everyone in like 3 minutes.
Right.
I'm like, so I don't know about that. I've watched
Hmm.
some of the tape on some of the, do y'all want to watch some tape? Like, look at their
Hmm.
strategies. So like, no, we're good. We'll beat
Yeah.
everyone. I'm like, all right. And they were like so cocky. I like moved them up a division.
Yeah.
Right. And
Nice.
they went in there and just got destroyed. Like they were
Hmm.
getting like, one of them he got submitted in like 4 seconds. Another one got just like strangled.
Uh-huh.
They were just getting beat. Like the car ride home was just silence. Right.
Yeah.
Like so pissed. They went from like so overconfident to like, wow, we just got our butts kicked. I didn't
Hmm.
say a word to them. I
Right,
didn't go,
because if
I
you
told you
said "I
so.
told you so," that would be the wrong moment for them to hear "I told you so" as well.
Yeah. And I think like after a game, like, no, oh, I told you this, told you that. Like now you just
Yeah,
put them on like where they're just going to shut off like learning the lesson. Like they've got
yeah,
to learn that lesson themselves. But it was like a couple days later, they came up and go, okay, uh, Dad, can you help us so that that never happens again? Because that was
amen.
embarrassing. I'm like,
Yeah,
yeah, right. It's like, yeah,
yeah,
when the student's ready, the teacher will appear, right?
yeah, 100%. And I think that's the hard part. Parenting kids in sports is especially if you know the sport, right? If you can help, and yet biting your tongue to the extent until they ask for help, and then they're much more likely to listen or pay attention or dedicate because they've asked for it versus just giving it. Now, I mean, our instinct as a parent is protect our kids. It hurts to see them fail. It hurts to see them struggle, but we also know that this is this is where growth happens, right? This is where resilience develops. And if we intervene in all those moments, which we now see a lot of people do in youth sports, right? Your kid's struggling, you switch teams, you switch clubs, you try to get the coach fired instead of saying, man, what a wonderful opportunity for growth.
Yeah. And I think if you look at it that way, I mean, let's be honest here. Like most kids who are playing sports are never going to be professional athletes.
Right.
Most of them aren't even going to play in high school,
Yeah.
right? They're not going to remember whether they won 10U Little League, but they're going to remember if they're how their parent like talked to them, how their coaches talk to them,
Yeah.
right? I think as coaches, like sometimes it's important to know like when not to say anything.
Yeah.
Even like as
100%. Yeah.
parents, like, and you can tell like such a difference between parents who played a sport at a high level and how they interact with their kids,
Yeah.
parents who maybe never did,
Yeah.
right? And it's we all have the same thing if we want to help our kids succeed, right?
Hmm.
Like that is the goal. But like an example in baseball, you'll see is like a kid's up there throwing and he's starting to struggle. And they're like, oh, your release point, you're this, you're that. It's like, let me throw out every mechanical thing I can think of to try
Hmm.
to help this kid. And
Hmm.
what you're actually doing is making him perform like 10 times worse.
Yeah, exactly. You're making him
Right.
think about something that
Yeah.
shouldn't have thought in the moment. Yeah. You
Yeah.
know,
All I do with like little kids that are pitching for me, they'll throw like four, like outside the plate over here. And I'll walk out there and be like, what's going on? He's like, oh, coach, I don't know. It's like, I'm like, well, hey, you're pitching fine. You threw four in the same spot. Where are you aiming? I'm aiming at the glove. I'm like, okay, cool. Aim at the batter's elbow.
hmm
He's like, and then right down the middle. I'm like, cool. Just keep aiming there and throw. And he's like,
hmm
that's all I got to do. I'm like, yeah, that's it.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, exactly. And don't yeah, and stop thinking about it. So what about these other components, right? Seeking the knowledge we've talked about. And then this idea of like practice, right? You said it before, confidence, you know, comes from competence, right? But
Yeah.
and then but at the same time, we had this guy, Dr. Mitch Green, on the podcast, and it was really good. He has this book called Courage Over Confidence. He says you're not going to be confident a lot, and that's when you need courage, right?
Yeah.
You need the courage to just go throw the pitch, right? Or swing away or whatever. But if you're waiting around your whole life to feel confident, you're never going to get anything done.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Yeah.
Like whenever I went to Q school, like I wasn't really confident, but I had the courage to like
Yeah.
get on the first tee. You know,
Yeah.
didn't like I'm nervous to say, but man, like I'm here. Like
Yeah.
here we. So
Yeah.
it's like, and part of that is like having the courage to step up there and put yourself in the situation, right? Because you can build the skills and training, but until you actually go and start competing,
Yeah.
like, and how do you get confident in doing something? You do it a bunch of times,
Yeah.
but you got to have the courage to like do it the first time and the second time and the third time and fail until it basically becomes boring for you.
Yeah.
I think that's where like as SEALs, like what sets SEALs apart is our training.
Hmm.
We train on something so much, like shooting becomes like, I don't even like shooting.
Yeah.
I've shot so much that it's just boring for me.
Hmm.
When I go to shoot, like you go hunting and like, oh wow, you know, I'll bow hunt some, and I got
Hmm.
one. It's like, oh man, you went through the both lungs and the heart. Like, oh, that
Hmm.
was such a great shot. Like, were you nervous? I was like, no, man, it's just like what you do, right? And
Yeah.
it's not, but it's just because I've done it, you know, something like that so many times
Yeah.
that you don't even like think about it. But it didn't start that way.
Yeah. No, it doesn't. And that's the thing. Again, I think as a parent, because this book is also about like how can coaches and parents help your young athletes,
Yeah,
help your children through it. You're supposed to be the adult. You have the perspective, right? Of, well, what are you missing in this moment? Do you not know what to do? Or have you not learned it yet? I think a lot of times we default to, oh, they just don't care, right? If they cared, they'd get it. It's like, no, maybe they just don't have the competence yet. And so you got to get your reps in, right? Just
yeah,
like you're not going to get stronger in the weight room until you do your reps. You're not going to get, feel confident pitching in a competition or, on the first tee of a golf tournament until you've been on the first tee a lot of times. And then you're going to feel confident
yeah,
or at least have a chance to feel confident.
yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I find like every time I play golf, if I hit it well on the range before I play, I'm usually this is not going to go well. I'm the opposite, right? I'm like, but if I hit a few shanks and whatever, I'm like, oh, okay, I got it. Like I think I'm good here because it can't get any worse. Yeah.
And the beautiful thing about that, like, you know, the system I lay out in the book is, you know, it doesn't have to, it has to be linear, right? Like it's a loop, right? And
Yeah.
it's like sometimes, like, if your kid's not like ready to have that assessment and really like, oh, this is where I'm at, this is what I'm good at, this is what I need to work on, then they need to fail a bunch
Yeah. Yeah.
to get to that point of like, wow, I'm really tired of failing, right? And it's like I talk in there about like how you use failure as fuel, and
Yeah.
like
I love that line.
failure isn't like a bad thing, it's how you learn. Well,
Yeah.
I add a caveat to that.
Yeah.
Just failing and not learning why you're failing is
Yeah.
not a good thing.
That's just a waste of time.
That's just a waste of your time.
Yeah.
But failing and going like failing cheaply and quickly is the fastest way to success. Like in entrepreneurship, you're like, I've got an idea. How can I test this cheaply and fastly
Right.
and fail and prove that wrong or right and move forward? So it's the same in sports. Like, okay, I've got to go fail at this and then come back to my assessment. Okay, am I missing a knowledge piece?
Yeah.
What's that knowledge piece? And then the deliberate practice is like, okay, now I'm going to take that knowledge and how can I break this down into a step-by-step process?
Yeah.
Like teams, we use the crawl, walk, run,
Mm-hmm.
right? And
Hmm.
it's like every time you went through like a CQC block where you're doing, you know, room clearing, right? CQC is close quarters combat.
Hmm.
You don't start with, you know, 40 guys running through multiple houses in a big compound. You
Hmm.
start with two guys
Hmm.
with pistols walking with no ammo.
Hmm.
And you get your basics down, right? It's like
Yeah.
be building at the basics. So you build that, and that's every time you go through it. So
Yeah.
you've done it 10 times, like, okay, this is where you're starting. And boom, you've got that fundamental down. Now you're going to add 4 guys, now 6
Hmm.
guys, 8 guys, and now you're going to go multi rooms and obstacles in the room. So sometimes, like as coaches, like we make these things like too complex from the start.
Hmm.
Like, what is the simplest way to make this happen?
Yeah.
Right? Start there.
Yeah. My friend Alan Stein, he used to be a basketball trainer and he used to do Kobe Bryant's skills camps. And so, he went and watched, Kobe train himself. And, he was obviously still playing at that time. And he said, he was doing the most basic stuff, the stuff that you'd teach to 10-year-olds. And he was like, "You're doing the most basic." He goes, you're one of the best players in the world, and you're doing the most basic drills." And Kobe's like, "Why do you think I'm one of the best players in the world?"
Yeah.
Right? And I think that's exactly what you're talking about, right? The SEALs, you're doing the most basic thing
Yeah.
because that's how it just becomes natural.
I mean, the basics are the thing. I mean,
Yeah.
and it's really you look at any sport, any business, anything, the
Hmm.
people who are the best at it
Yeah.
are masters of the basics.
Yeah.
We had a
100%.
officer once told us like, "Hey guys, all I expect of y'all is to be brilliant at the basics.
Yeah.
That's it. If you can do that, we'll be able to execute any mission that comes our way."
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so often it's like, kids see like, oh, the highlight reel of somebody doing something crazy. So, oh, let me practice that. But that's not what got the person there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Getting good at the basics. Like they did that stuff for entertainment.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. No, it's funny, like work with like soccer goalkeepers or whatever. And, it's just like, you know what? Like reach your hands and your feet out and make this. If you can save that every time, you're going to be just fine. Right. But don't be the one who picks the ball out of the corner and then the next time it goes through your legs. Like just do the basics. Just
Yeah.
save the ones that, 90% of the shots that are coming right at you or whatever. Well, what would you say? What's your biggest takeaway that you want parents and coaches to get from this book, and kids obviously too?
Yeah. I mean, it's the assessment, right? Like it all starts there.
Yeah.
Um, right. And it's, understanding like failure is a part of our growth. Right.
Yeah.
So and I tell the kids on my baseball team, like, hey, when you mess up a play, not if,
Hmm.
when you mess up a play, I said, that's not our goal, but when you mess up a play, I don't want you to like hold your head down and like sweat about it and do all that. I just want you to go, okay, all right, this next play, how can I do better?
Hmm. Hmm.
Right. So it's how do we like fail forward, right? How do
Yeah.
we learn from our failure and throw that back into our assessment, get the knowledge, train for it, and then just not make the same mistake again. Right.
Yeah.
And then just keep pushing yourself that higher and higher level. So as kids, it's, you know, pretty like as the athlete, just, get out there and you're trying, listen to your coach's feedback. Like that's an important thing I talk about in the book. Like your coaches and your parents are there to help you.
Yeah.
But sometimes like as athletes, like we hear feedback and we like take it personally. Right. So sometimes like, I even encourage like, hey, go ask for feedback, but have some thick skin. Right.
Yeah.
Because maybe somebody sees something you don't see.
Yeah.
For like coaches and parents, say it's like, and ask good questions to get them to come to that answer. So kind of
Hmm.
use the Socratic method to get there. And then don't overcoach. Like let them try to guide them to get to that assessment process where they're coming to you like, how do I do this? How do I do
Hmm.
that? Because whenever you have somebody who's hungry for the information and hungry to improve,
Hmm.
the improvement scale, it's not like improvement isn't a slow linear thing. Like it's rapid,
Hmm.
right? And you could read I think it's whose book is it on mastery? George Leonard, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
He talks about like, you go through these spurts and then you hit these plateaus, right? But if you're going to be in these plateaus, right? And you're like, oh, they're not improving. Well, they're in a plateau, right? Like you've
Hmm.
built your skills and now it's like, okay, what is the next? It's probably like some basic there that's
Hmm.
missing that they've got to fix. So it's like back to that assessment.
Hmm.
So,
Hmm.
so
Awesome.
use
Yeah.
failure, ask good questions.
Yeah, I mean, amen to that. And again, I think we have a sports environment right now where too many kids are shielded from failure. Too many kids don't have autonomy to ask those questions, right? It's they're pursuing their parents' dreams or a coach's dream, and then they just don't want to do the hard work that others do, that others are willing to put in, and people want to solve that problem for them as well. And so I think this is, I mean, I say all the time, right? The role of parents in sports, like, is to be the adult in the room, to have the life perspective and to tell the truth, tell the truth. You're not doing what it takes to keep to make it on this team or to do that, right? Or you want to complain about your coach? Is your coach wrong? Do you show up early? Do you stay late? how many times have you gotten up before school this week and worked on A, B, and C?
Yeah.
So, you know, you're not even giving the coach a difficult choice at this moment, you know?
Yeah. And if you want to get, good grades, like really like any goal,
Yeah.
the system's the same, right?
Hmm.
It's literally like the system to accomplish anything you're trying to accomplish. It's the same system I use for everything in business.
Yeah.
But it's easier to like learn those lessons through sports
Hmm.
because the end goal is clearly defined.
And the consequences of failure are really not that big.
No,
Yeah.
there's essentially, really no consequence.
There's really no consequence at all. Yeah, exactly. Well, Chad, can you tell people how to get the book and then also your website and ways that they can connect with you?
Yes, you can get the book on Amazon.
Mhm.
I also have it on my website at mentaltoughnessandconfidence.com. You can find me on social media with some just Chad Metcalf. You'll be able to find me Instagram, YouTube, all those places. And then I've also got a challenge I'm going to be rolling out here uh, right before the school year ends. I'll start opening kind of the wait list for it.
Mhm.
But it's essentially a challenge for parents to give their teenagers,
Mm.
which is get a summer job or do the next great adventure program and figure out what you want to do with your life.
Mm. Mm.
So, I think I'm having my teens do it. And I asked my 15-year-old, I'm like, which one do you want to do? And he's like, can I do both?
Yeah. Sweet.
Okay. Yeah, let's do both. So
Perfect.
if they're interested in that, they can jump on there and there'll be more information about that.
Awesome. Perfect. Well, listen, I really, really enjoyed our chat today. Again, everyone, the book is Young Athlete's Ultimate Guide to Mental Toughness. And yeah, just some great stuff in there, some great tools. And we certainly appreciate, your story, your service to the country, and your service to today's kids as well.
All right. Thanks for having me.
Thanks everyone for listening. Thanks again, Chad Metcalf, at Chad Metcalf on social. And then you can find the Young Athlete's Ultimate Guide to Mental Toughness on Amazon. And then website, mentaltoughnessandconfidence.com as well. And his summer challenge that he talked about there as well. All right. Talking about your summer challenge again, registration is now open for the 2024 Way of Champions Conference, August 9th, 10th, 11th, Denver, Colorado Academy again. It's going to be an awesome, awesome weekend. Amazing coaches. There is a live session. There's a live stream if you can't get to Denver at that time. And we're going to be announcing speakers and guest speakers and other exciting stuff here soon. But please join us. Please sign up for our email lists. Please reach out if you're interested in speakers, presentations at your school, things like that. Just my direct email, John, JOHN, at changingthegameproject.com. Okay. Remember, everyone, your influence is never neutral. So go out there, change the world, make a positive difference this week. We'll see you again next week.